Hi, everyone. This is Lee. I'm here with Duke, and this is Good News on
Good
GoodVue
view,
Network.
yeah.
Good to
Yeah,
have you back and to be
man.
together in
Yeah,
the studio.
finally, after almost a month and a half.
Couple of months,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we have a special guest today. This is Pastor Steve Gray, and he is from the pastor from the Cornfield Revival in Smithton, Missouri, right?
Yep.
And that
Yep.
was in 1990.
96 to 2000.
Wow, 1996, 2000. And we're going to get into the good news today of revival in the church in America and around the world, because we are an international network. About 25% of our viewers are outside the United States. And we got to be at the NRB
That
and
was a
hear
good
about
time.
revival going on in
Yeah,
India
yeah.
and, really some exciting things. And Duke, you wanted to talk before we got started about.
Yeah, because I think this absolutely correlates. But we found out that NRB, the CEO of NRB, just confirmed a letter or affirmed a letter that it's actually official that social media, like YouTube platforms like that, were genuinely oppressing Christian material, Christian content. They were doing it, and he was kind of giving kudos and accolades to the person that actually stood up and said, "Hey, enough's enough." And so before it was they were kind of treating us like it was just hearsay. We're being, wackos. There's no persecution. No one's trying to oppress our voice. But then when they did the investigation, they actually found out that they were oppressing Christian content on purpose.
Right.
So a lot of the social media platforms were genuinely blocking the message of Christ. And I thought, wow, this definitely correlates to what we're talking about the persistence that believers have to have. Like, this is a world that genuinely doesn't want us here. and so we've got to be persistent, and we've got to be creative and push through. But I wanted to just say personally to the CEO of NRB, good job for promoting that and putting that, making that public statement that you stand by them, because a lot of people would think YouTube's a giant. Who would want to mess with them? But that's genuinely how revival starts, is when we stand for what we truly believe in. So thank you again, Pastor Steve Gray, for being here with us.
Yep.
And let's talk revival, man. Let's do it.
Well, just before we get to that, in the new Barna Cultural Research Center, survey among all U.S. adults, say just 16% say God is the most important element of their life, and fewer than 1/3, 31%, believe God is actively involved in every moment of their life, and only 9% claim an intimate, interactive relationship with Him. So, boy, there's real opportunity for revival there. So, tell us how it happened then, and what do we need to do now?
Yeah, and I'm a little bit of a radical in some ways, and people think they like radicals until they hear them sometimes. So I'll try to stay in the groove with you and not go outside my lane too much. But with those statistics you just said, I don't know if anybody else would say this, but my experience has been a lot of the reason of those numbers that don't sound too good. It's, in my opinion, it's the leadership that's faltered, not the people. And so that started my journey. And I got I was in Omaha, and I did a Assembly of God church or something. And a guy comes running up to the buses, is leaving, pounding on the door, gave me a stack of, remember cassette tapes?
Yeah.
A stack of tapes by Winky Pratney called Revival. I listened to him from Omaha clear to Michigan and over and over and over. I didn't know that stuff. I didn't know these revivalists. And so that sparked it in me that I want to be a part of something like that. And so then when we decided to go for a local church, and my wife said, maybe you should pastor. And at first I said, oh, no, not that. But I'm glad now I did. But it's a very interesting story. We got offered a really nice church in Chicago, not the senior, but right below, to be trained for the future. He was going to retire. And so they gave us a fantastic package. I'll just say that. And it was a new part of Chicago, and it was just already picked out a house and all that. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. In the meantime, we lived in this little town. Our house got hit with a tornado, and it got and most of the people lost their homes. This one just set it off its foundation, so it got condemned. So we had to move. And housing was hard to find. There's like 500 families looking for housing. And so this little town, Smithton, had some houses they'd built and said, hey, here's a brand new one. Would you qualify? You want to move out this little town? I thought, great place to go, park the bus, not have to, how many people would I be talking to in that size of town? So that's kind of what I was thinking. But in the meantime, then, when the Chicago thing came up, they came to me and we said, we have a church at the other end of town. I didn't even know it was there in that small town. It was built in 1859. It's a historical site and it's going to be torn down. Would you be our pastor so it doesn't get torn down? They didn't really care about church, and I said, of course not. I'm going to Chicago. They came back a second time and said, please, it's going to be torn down. Would you take this church? And I said, listen, we're already packing, So no. They came one more time, said, would you please come over and talk to us again? So I did, just because, I wanted to be good, neighborly. And so while I'm there, they're going through the whole thing. He said, listen, we'll just hand it over to you, to your ministry. You can just have it. It wasn't much, but it had been locked up for 4 years. They had a little upstart of the Holy Spirit, and people started speaking in tongues. And the one treasurer that was alive put a lock on it. And I had heard a sermon recently by Kenneth Copeland on integrity. Keep your word. And I thought, I just said I'd pray about it. And I thought, I better do it. So I go in my living room, I lay it out. Okay, God, here it is. Here's Chicago, the money, the house, not much to think about, is there? And here's a church. It has no people, no money, no future, in a town of 532 people. There was no gas station. There's no grocery store, nothing. All right. And then I opened my mouth and I said, Jesus, what would you do? This is what I heard from heaven. He said, I'll tell you what I would do. I would raise the dead.
Oh.
And I think all the blood went from my head to my feet. I went down to my knees and I was speechless, because you know what? I thought, that's what you would do. And I said, imagine people lined up and they'd clap and cheer and everything, because it was so beyond, I think, their faith that they'll just cheer, Well, 12 years passed. That's a hunk of your life, especially that age I was. It was a great age to be, but 12 years. And then small towns have a tendency to run things the way they want to run, but they use the weapons of gossip and backbiting, and everybody knows everybody. And I didn't grow up there, and so they had their little club. And it just got to be when they got with a couple of people that were in the church and kind of influenced their opinion, I'm going like, what is this? I came here in this little town, and now I'm going through all this junk, that pastors go through. And the church is doing great, and I started not doing great. And here's what happened. I didn't know that, but I know now. I preached revival, and I believed it, I studied it, and I wanted it, but I wasn't ready for it. And I thought I was. I wasn't ready. I knew that afterwards, because the people started coming from all over the world. They came from all over the world for 3.5 years. But before that, why didn't they come before that? Because nobody wanted to hear me preach that much, or whatever I did. It was okay. It was good. But when I then was struck, so I, after being there 12 years, I got up in the pulpit and I said, I am like the woman with the issue of blood. She gave all that she had, and still she was sick. I said, I've been here 12 years. I've given everything I know to give, and still I'm no better. And I walked out. 2 weeks later, I walked back in, but that was the valley of the shadow of death for me. As I was being prepared, I was losing my life. I lost my, I'm in a good way losing my life. Like it says, lose your life and you'll find it. I was losing myself at a rapid pace, not knowing anything. I finally started getting a little more hope up. So I left, like I said, for 2 weeks, and I called Kathy and said, I'll come back, but I'm not coming in and just starting over. If God doesn't do something, then I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm going to believe in God. I'll still love Jesus, but so I drove back and parked in the same spot for 12 years. The worship was going. It was a Sunday night. I put my hand on the door and I felt absolutely nothing. And so I opened the door. First thing I saw was Kathy. She's standing there 12 feet away or whatever. And I thought, and the people are all staring. I go, give your wife a hug, dummy. Do something, So, okay, I haven't seen my wife for a couple of weeks. I'll go give her a hug. I walked toward her and I did not make it. 2 steps away, before my arms could even reach her, I was struck with a lightning bolt from heaven, is all the way I could. I mean, I was electrified. And the good thing about it is the whole congregation saw it. I like it because I didn't say, hey, I had in the middle of the night, God really appeared to me, and they go, oh, sure, or whatever. They saw me change, and I became a different person. I got a
In
sense of
a
humor.
moment like that, well, boom,
Right there.
like
Right there. I became, and I jumped, I twirled. That's what they said. I don't remember that part, and I'm not particularly fond of twirling, but they said I did. And I could only talk half sentences like a person that was hit, either electrified or hit with a stroke or something. I would start talking, and then I couldn't talk. God was just changing my speech, changing me, and I went home a different person. And I realized then what happened to Paul or Saul on the road to Damascus. He was a persecutor that became a preacher. And how fast did that happen? And I realized I'm different. And it wasn't just the hurts or discouragements that happened as a pastor. This went clear back to my childhood. Things that happened to everybody, that things happen, it all went away. And I'm like, what do I do with myself now? So I told him, I don't know what this is. I said, but I'm coming back tomorrow night to find out. And when I showed up, I didn't stay. We're going to have church, but I showed up. The whole church was back. And that went on the first week. We went Sunday through Wednesday or Thursday. Everybody showed up.
Can
Yes,
I
sir?
ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
What happened in those 2 weeks to you when?
Oh, good point.
Yeah, I got to hear that.
Well, I locked myself up in a hotel room and went to church at night in the churches around and screamed into my pillow. I felt nothing, especially the first week. I didn't eat. I didn't hardly slept. I didn't talk to one person. I wasn't thinking like a pastor. I was thinking like, yeah, they asked me, well, Steve, what's going on here? What do you want? And I said, you know what I want? I want to live again. I want to feel. I want to laugh. I want to charge ahead. I don't want to just, I want to live. I said, that's all I want. Jesus, I want you and I want your life. So the first week was rough. And then the second week got a little bit better. And I was sitting in the balcony of this church and I thought I'd gone crazy, to be transparent about it. I heard a voice, and it was very similar to the voice I'd heard when he said I'd raised the dead 12 years earlier. I heard a voice that said, I want you to have a revival. And I'm looking like, this is crazy. I haven't been eating. I'm not home. I'm devastated. I'm not even thinking like a pastor. I went the next night to a service and I heard again, I want you to have a revival. And I thought, I'm playing mind games with myself. I'm trying to make myself feel better, like I have a future, Third night, I sat in the same balcony all by myself, and God said, I want you to have a revival. And I was still arguing. And then he followed up with a second line, and he said, I didn't say you had to be the revival. And all of a sudden it lifted like, oh. And I kind of imagined myself like serving, like a waiter, like, here, could I help you? Or here's some hors d'oeuvres. Would you like a little revival, or would you like some hors d'oeuvres? And when I saw that picture, that's when the hope said, well, maybe I could do that. And so I was alone for 2 weeks, very, very tough. And
so you're saying that because you said earlier, that you weren't ready.
Yes.
And then you went through this 2 weeks, and then you came back and this electrofusion.
Yeah, whatever. Because I wanted to be filled, but what I didn't know, I was already full. And I needed to be emptied. I didn't need to be filled. I thought I did, fill me, Lord, and I thought I need to be filled. Wow. I didn't. I needed to be emptied, and I didn't know that. So I'm wanting revival, but I didn't know the cost of how much would you give up to be this vessel. So before revival hit, like we had cassette tapes at the back of the church, which nobody ever took one. They were free sermons. Nobody ever took one. Every once in a while, I'd go back and grab a handful just to make it look like there was some interest.
So before you move on to that, so you said you needed to be emptied. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Oh, good point. Yeah, I need to explain that. Two things I had learned a little bit after that too. The way I would describe it, I was too tall, and I'm not a tall person, but on the inside, I stood up too tall, and I had things that I thought were okay. And I'm not talking about sin or bad habits or anything like that. I'm talking about just personal viewing of yourself. And you know, when I say too tall, it's like I think of King Saul. He was a head taller than everybody else, and he seemed like the natural. So I realized that everybody can do that. We get so tall, we think we're a head taller than everybody else. So if I wasn't changed, I might be sitting here thinking, well, I really know a lot more than you guys, and nobody can fool me, and I'm not ever going to be tricked because I see, I know, I understand, and I know what's good for me. And so it's like I'm taller than the rest of you, and I can see over all of you. Well, that Saul, that became kind of his prideful part of his downfall. And I had to become smaller, like John the Baptist said. I got to decrease. I didn't know it, and I didn't ask for it, but it was happening, and
Yeah.
it was happening rapidly. But it's okay because how we doing on time? Am I talking too much? You want to still hear some more, right?
We want to get on to what you think is going to be. This is good because we want to get to what you think is required for revival today. You know, you can briefly tell us how it exploded and what you learned from that and what you think we need to do today.
Yeah. One thing that happened to me though, while I was going through that valley, which I'll just finish this part up real quick, is I was so beaten up by me, everything like that. First of all, I found out during the hard times, I couldn't even fight. I should have been able to, but it seemed like I couldn't even fight the devil. You know, he's just firing away at me. Loser, you idiot. You know, you failed. You're a bad father. You're a bad, just everything that he likes to do to torment people. And then I tormented myself. I think I believed some of it, and some of it was true. You know, I found out the devil is a liar until he talks about me. And so, but here's what really happened to me then.
That's good.
For the first time in my life, I was so weak just in myself, my self-strength. I couldn't fight the devil. I couldn't fight myself. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't fight God. And I didn't know I had been. It was like, guys, it was like I had a religious stop sign that I had already predetermined how far I'd let God go with me or how far I'd go with him. I live in a comfort zone. I have my religion is comfortable with me. I like what we do. Others might think we do it wrong or whatever, but I found out a lot of people, they already have set boundaries with God and they're afraid or they're nervous or they just don't know what to do. And I was all those things. But so when God wanted to do that, I finally came to the point and said, God, I don't care what you do. I didn't want to stretch it like take me home country roads. I didn't really want to do that, but I'll do anything. You can do anything you want to me, God. I will not stop because I have nothing. So yes, so I walked in and I was struck, twirled that. We didn't know what it was. We went the first couple of weeks and we ended up going 7 weeks, Sunday through Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which. And people started coming and attending. So I switched then to the weekend. We had prayer on Wednesday, then we had service Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and 2 services on Sunday at that time. Then we had to drop Sunday morning because it ran into Sunday night. The services were long. You show up at 6, our people did, and they just stay. And all our people came. And the teenagers, the kids, they quit playing soccer. They dropped this, that everybody wanted to be there. Then on top of that was the visitors, but they loved it because they got to host the world. People from Japan or Korea would come, a busload of them would come. They'd fly into Kansas City, take a bus. And so when it got to that point, we realized obviously something's going on and people started wanting to get in and filling up we moved into the gymnasium then the 8th week. And from then it just began to take off. And, then the news media picks up on stuff and St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Wall Street Journal and San Francisco Chronicle and Newsweek came, Time came, and then all the others like CBN and, other networks, TBN had me as guests, and that just, moved it more. And then Kathy and I began to travel every other week. At the beginning of the week, we'd travel someplace in the world and get back for church on the weekend. And that went on five services a week for 3.5 years. And the people were all there. And they need to be probably write their stuff of how did they do that? And they ask, people used to ask, how do you go to church 5 times, and these are long services too. And our people answered, it's not that hard. You just don't do anything else. Oh, okay. I see. So my life is too crowded if I don't have time for what God wants to do.
Hmm.
I think also we,
Do you
as
think
you
do you
go ahead.
think every revival necessarily looks like going to church all day, 5 days a week, or is there something from your experience in the internal, change that because I don't know if that sort of revival is going to happen again where people
And I
go,
don't either. Yeah.
yeah,
And I don't care. If it's God, I don't care. That's just what happened to us. It is
yeah,
interesting when I got, especially the Christian reporters that were reporting on it, and a lot of them came. I wanted them to ask about the glory of God and what it was like to stand in the glory and all that. And the number one question they asked me says, "Well, if we're going to have revival, do we have to go to church 5 days a week?" And I
Oh,
thought,
wow.
if that's your only question, then probably you don't need to worry about it. If that's your
Yeah.
fear, you have to go to church too much. And that was just what we did. But there's a reason we did it. When people come from, like when people would fly in from Singapore, that's halfway around the world. They came and they don't want to come to just a Sunday morning. You don't fly around the world for Sunday morning. They
That's
wanted to
good.
come for multiple, for their own sakes. And the
yeah,
more you soaked in it and were in it and the activity, those many services, they really, really, I mean, there's people all over the world, even today, I hear from that are still changed, and I'm still changed. And I think today we're talking revival today. One thing that I watch, two things I watch with all the changes we're having in our government. I know a lot of religious leaders and pastors and people. I don't want them to put their arms down like Moses had to have his arms up, during the battle and say,
yeah,
"Okay, we got a new administration. It's all going to be okay now." Because that's where you mentioned before this broadcast that we need to combine the spiritual with the political. And
right,
I went where there was a bunch of pastors, and everybody got to speak and say something, and almost every one of them got up and talked about politics and the way, and our country's gone the wrong way. Not one of them got up and said anything spiritual. And I feel like that's when I brought up the fault of the church is we need spirit. We need to talk. We need to walk by the Spirit, and we need people to help us walk by the Spirit. And so I'm a little
yes,
radical on that one. If you want to work people up, I tell the story of Jonah and the big fish. And they got on that. He didn't want to go preach. He didn't want to preach what God wanted him to preach, right?
That's
So
right.
he runs away, right? And what's he get on? He gets on a boat. And they're sailors, professional sailors, and they're saying, "We're going to drown. We're going to die. Let's throw stuff overboard." And we're in this storm, and they don't know what are we going to do about it. And all of a sudden, here comes a revelation, and Jonah says, "You know what?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what the problem is? Me. I won't preach what God wants me to, and if you want to get saved, throw me overboard. Throw the pastor overboard because he's not preaching. I won't say he. Jonah was not preaching what God wanted him to, and it's going to be crisis. There's going to be death. There's going to be
That's good.
storms. There's going to be trouble, and people don't put those two together. We think politics or whatever government covers us and don't realize the things we see in the world. A true move of God and revival and unity, as you guys have already spoken to me, is the cure. It's the cure for abortion. It's the cure for crime. It's the cure for all the other ails. And we still need legislation. We still need good politicians, but the
well,
spiritual side changes everything.
yeah, listen to what George Barna said in this. He said the numbers show us a nation deeply confused about its spiritual foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Even among those who claim to believe in God, there's unwillingness to submit to
Yeah.
his guidance, accept his boundaries, or acknowledge the responsibilities that come with faith. The result is a watered down Christianity that looks nothing like the biblical model. This shift, Barna says, is replacing biblical God-centered faith with a self-directed belief system that demands little,
Man,
accommodates everything.
what a guy, right? I mean, I couldn't say it any better than that. And he has hit, for me, the nail on the head. That's the cure to us. I think we're seeing a lot of good signs right now. I hesitate all the time to label something revival when sometimes before that comes an awakening, which leads to it. And we're sort of, I got a note that on one of the campuses from somebody that said, the phrase they use is they're getting saved and baptized. And then they want to call it revival. And it's okay. I don't mind that. But really, that's an awakening and the real power and move of God that changes and draws in, because it's hard to describe, because this is me now. For me, revival is not an evangelistic service. Okay. People need to get saved, no doubt about it. But you, if they're dead in their sins and trespasses, you don't want to revive that.
Right.
Revival is for those who have been like in the Good Samaritan story, the guy's on the road and he gets beat up, and it says, and he was left half dead. And I said, that's the hurting crowd. And and I should say this: when the revival started in Smithton, I followed the lead of other churches at first and thought evangelism, drug addicts and homeless, we're going to really reach those. None of them came. You know who came? Hundreds and hundreds of pastors that would not admit to me they did, but they came and they said, listen, I don't even, especially after I see this fire here, they'd say, I don't even know if I'm saved. I don't even know if I'm saved.
Wow.
I don't have this. And that's where it's really hard to describe the intensity of the real presence of God. It's overwhelming. You couldn't hardly stand up. You just, and I don't mean charismatic, fall down Pentecostal thing. I mean, you melt like wax at the presence of the Lord. That's my joy. I want to be with him. I want to be a candle and then melt like wax at the presence of the Lord. And it's really hard to describe what really took place.
Well, you say a prayer for us, because we're coming to the end. I want to make sure and hear your prayer for our viewers for revival like that.
We got to have him back on too.
And could I just give one piece of advice real quick, which I have not done on any broadcast? You're the only guys I feel I can share this with. But as I see good signs of revival and people talking more about revival than they have in recent years, one of the things I realized, we're so individualistic that I think to myself, here's a guy 45 years old or whether, and he's saying revival, but he doesn't really know. I thought, why don't you, I wish you'd contact me. I wish you'd call me. I'll talk to you on the phone. I'll tell you how I got there, how we prayed. We prayed 2 years every Tuesday night before it hit, 2 years, and preparing it. So yes, but John the Baptist is the one that said it. He says, who are you? He says, I'm a voice and I'm here to prepare the way. And I'd like to teach, I would like to express that more. We can prepare, because if it hits, we're so self-centered, like Barna said, our selfishness, we're not ready. Like I said, I wasn't ready. I think I was more ready than a lot of people because I was really wanting, but I didn't realize what I needed to go through like that. But yes, I don't want to run out of time before I get to pray for you guys and all the gals and guys listening today. Father, in the name of Jesus, you are a great God. I love you more today than I've ever loved you before. You're a life changer. You gave me new life. You solved what I couldn't solve. And now, Lord, there are millions of people that want to grow. They want to go. They want to be, and they don't know how. But your grace causes us to be doers that don't deserve to do, and be things we don't deserve to be, and go places we don't deserve to go. Let your spirit fall on us, but let us be ready, hungry, thirsty for the things of God. Give us that gift of thirst. Because if we're thirsty and hungry, we'll always stay on track with you. So stretch out your mighty right arm, our host today. Stretch out your mighty right arm with signs, wonders, miracles, and most of all, change our heart. Change us, Lord, so we can love you. We really can start where it all begins, to love you with all of our heart. And to me, that's revival. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
What a joy just to talk to you guys. You asked such good questions.
Thank you.
You got to come back on, man.
Oh, I'll be ready. Buy my book.
Oh,
SteveGrayMinistries.com. You can get my brand new book, Mighty Like Gideon. And if you go there to our website, we have a workbook and it's $1 is all. It's really worth getting. And for you guys, if you go to SteveGrayMinistries.com, for you guys particularly, pick up this small book. It's dynamite. It's only 5 chapters. I was going to speak at a Republican thing, breakfast. So I wrote this real fast and I gave it away. And so you will really, I think you'll understand it, because I really wanted it to say what it needed to say. That's my advertisement.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Steve.
Anytime you want, just holler through well, you can go to my website and you can contact me or anybody else you want to. Love to be on it with you again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's nice meeting you guys.